know why the CEO is worth that much more? Oh my God. Why is the CEO worth $100 million and the employee is not? Do you know why?
Because he's paid that.
Because that's what it costs to get him. Because if you don't pay that much, someone else will.
What a big shout out to a whole bunch of individuals here, friends of the show. Big fan of Radical Will. It was really nice to see Will do one of these, talk politics. It's not normally in his wheelhouse, but, he did a great job. Actual Jake, of course, throwing down. And none other than Cyber Witch Lexi and Ayme. Ayme, whose passion, by the way, happens to be housing projects and getting people, safe, affordable housing. So fabulous that she was there and represented quite well.
So we know what decision they're going to say. What are the employees of Walmart going to want, Steven?
They're going to want higher wages.
Yeah, they're going to want higher wages. So, this is going to be universally a thing. That's what every employee is going to want across the board. And then they're going to have 20%, and then what? Their vote's not going to be denied?
Well, let's think about that.
Sure.
The CEO makes $23 million.
Because he's worth that. Do you know why he's worth that?
Do you really think that the Walden motherfucker is worth $23 million?
Wait, do you know why the CEO is worth that much more? Oh, my God. Why is the CEO worth $100 million and the employee is not? Do you know why?
Because he's paid that.
Because that's what it costs to get him. Because if you don't pay that much, someone else will. That's what he's worth. Do you know what the greeter at Walmart is worth? $5 an hour. That's a fact.
Somebody's grandma or grandpa you're talking about. No,
this is a fact. This is what they're willing to be paid to get there. The value of something, what someone's paid, is the minimum the company can pay to get that person there. That's the minimum. They're not setting it to $100 million because fuck it, let's waste a bunch of money. They're setting it to that amount because if they don't, Pepsi's going to spend that much and get them.
Somebody please push back against that.
CEO pay versus the employee pay. Now, CEOs historically are making more money now than they ever have before. As I said before, back in the day, they used to make about 25 times their employees, and now it's gone to the point where they make between 700 and 1,000 times their employees' wage. Now, the idea that anyone can be a Walmart greeter, that is, it's just someone off the street within a very short amount of time could do that job versus the job of a CEO, which is obviously a very skilled job that requires a whole bunch of training and stuff like that. These arguments you're probably going to hear quite frequently. The meritocracy. That is a society built up in which your worth is derived from your ability to demonstrate value. Everyone within a meritocracy, and it sounds like it's going to be a very egalitarian system, right? At the end of the day, everybody puts in as much effort as they want, and based on the amount of effort they put in, they will then receive rewards. You reap what you sow. We separate the wheat from the chaff, and nobody wants to be the chaff. Speaking of CEOs, we'll start here. And this is from, again, the far left pinko commie publication known as Forbes magazine. The highest paid CEOs are the worst performers, new study says. Across the board, the more CEOs get paid, the worse their companies do over the next 3 years, according to extensive new research. So one of the reasons that the increase of pay has come so egregiously for CEOs happens to be the fact that they're not actually just paid directly by the companies themselves anymore. In fact, there are certain companies in which they might only accept $1 for their income. The reason being is that they're mostly paid in stocks. Now, the incentivization behind this makes sense, right? If you pay a CEO in stocks from his company, he's going to be incentivized to want to make the most amount of profit. I mean, they do have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to increase profits and make the most amount of profit possible. That is definitely a thing.
The highest paid CEOs are consistently the worst performers. And the most overpaid CEOs perform even worse, actually destroying shareholder value. Overconfident, they may surround themselves with yes men and refuse to reverse bad decisions. Now, who does that sound like?
Like, oh, he has an anime pillow of himself. I need that. That's got to be the next thing for me. Oh, yeah, that's going to be the next phase. That's when you know you made it, when you got anime pillows of yourself.
Activity of American workers nearly doubled in the 30 years after World War II, and so did hourly wages. This helped build the American middle class. But things didn't stay that way. Productivity kept rising, but wages flatlined. A new political and economic philosophy had taken hold.
Reagan. if you have an economic system in which you want to incentivize people, and you have company and corporations, you want to incentivize them to produce the most amount of output to make the most amount of money possible, it behooves you to give them stock options, right? It just makes perfect sense. Now, there's a couple problems here. One being that under neoliberalism, and because we have an interconnected world and we have basically a capitalist economy that depends on different countries, but also can take advantage of other countries, a company doesn't have to act in its own self-interest, or at least in the interests of its employees, or even in the interests of the company or the country of its origin, right? This crosses country lines. So in cases of, say, Michigan or Detroit, where you have a whole bunch of industry, all of a sudden, if it makes more fiduciary sense, and from a CEO's perspective, it makes more fiduciary sense to move your factories overseas because you can exploit cheaper labor there, you're going to do it. It doesn't matter. You're going to do this across the board. You're going to do this any single time that there's an option to do so. You're going to move to areas where labor is either cheaper, there's less regulation, people can produce more profit, because at the end goal, that's what this machine is basically spinning towards.
The question of why, if one's in any way good, clever, or able, one is still poor, becomes infinitely more acute and painful for the unsuccessful to have to answer to themselves and other people in a new meritocratic age. There's turned out to be no shortage of people willing to answer the question on behalf of the poor. For a certain constituency, it's clear, and perhaps even scientifically provable, that the poor owe their position to their own stupidity and degeneracy. With the rise of an economic meritocracy, in certain quarters, the poor have moved from being described as unfortunate, the target of the charity and guilt of the paternally minded rich, to being described as failures, fair targets of contempt in the eyes of robust, self-made individuals who are disinclined to feel shamed about their mansions or shed crocodile tears for those whose company they've escaped. In the harsher climate of opinion that can gestate in the fertile corners of meritocratic societies, it's become possible to argue that the social hierarchy rigorously reflects the qualities of the members on every rung of the ladder, and
So how many times have you heard this? How many times have you seen someone on the street asking for money, or you've seen someone walk by them and they blame their conditions on themselves, where they're called parasites or leeches or cockroaches at the end of the day, right? Because these people are basically failures. They've failed at life. They've failed at the video game of life. And that's the reason that they're poor. And the rich people, obviously, the CEOs of these companies, the landlords, everyone who has everything, every possession given to them, they have succeeded where others have failed. That's the entire point of all of this. That's the point of capitalism.
Are actually the benefits of their hard work. You think about the way wealth works in this country is that in 2053, the median wealth for black people is going to be $0, the lowest recorded wealth since we've been recording wealth in this way. And you think about a median wealth of $0, and you think about white wealth, which will be around $100,000, and the median black wealth will be $0. Is that it's not like white people worked hard for that. It's not like white people, every white person was some entrepreneur that did all these wealth building things. The government literally gave white people wealth. The government gave white people housing loans for very little interest. The government gave white people land. The highway administration created the suburbs. And you think about what it means that the government gave white people education en masse. Those things contributed to white wealth. But there are people who are I worked really hard. And it's how hard did you work for a system that just benefits your skin color at every turn of the way? You didn't do that. How hard did you work for every Band-Aid to look like you? How hard did you work for nude to be the color of your skin and not mine? You didn't do that. A system did that.
The quickest way I could explain this is if you're playing an NES game, and anyone who has those NESs back in the day remembers blowing on the cartridges and everything. If you're born into a certain amount of privilege, all right, you get to play the game with a game genie. And you get to use all the cheat codes you want, while the other players have to use the regular game. And anyone who played those old games, especially Mega Man 2 or Battletoads, knows how fucking hard those games were to beat, all right? They were fucking impossible. Although, if you had a cheat code, you probably could get through those really hard levels. Why aren't you rich? Turns out it's just chance. The most successful people are not the most talented, just the luckiest. A new computer model for wealth creation confirms, taking into account that we can maximize return on any kinds of investments. The distribution of wealth follows a well-known pattern sometimes called the 80-20 rule. 80% of the wealth is owned by 20% of the people. Indeed, a report last year concluded that just 8 men had a total wealth equivalent to half of the world's poorest 3.8 billion people. For example, intelligence, as measured in IQ tests, follows this pattern. Average IQ is 100, but nobody has an IQ of 1,000 or 10,000. Except for Jordan Peterson. The same is true of effort. as measured by hours worked. Some people work more hours than average and some people work less. Nobody works a billion times more hours than anyone else. And yet, when it comes to the rewards for their work, some people do have billions of times more wealth than other people. What's more, numerous studies have shown that the wealthiest people are generally not the most talented by other measures. What factors then determine how individuals become wealthy? Could it be a chance that it plays a bigger role than anyone expected? And how could these factors, whatever they are, be exploited to make the world a better and fairer place?
We intuitively know that the crisis would have been less severe. We intuitively know that if there were more women at the senior leadership tables, that the crisis would have been less severe. And not only do we know it intuitively, the research tells us this. The research tells us that homogenous teams tend to overtrust each other. We cognitively finish each other's sentences. Oh, she's just like me, or he's just like me. So therefore, since we look and talk and act alike and have a set of shared experiences, I understand what you're thinking and what you'll do next. The other thing that the research tells us is that trading risk can be driven by testosterone. And that as gentlemen's testosterone increases, they take on more trading risk. As it reduces, less trading risk. And you know who doesn't have a lot of testosterone? Women. And it's funny because we women get that rap for being so emotional and so hormone driven. But in fact, what the research tells us is you can track the risk with testosterone, not estrogen.
73% of the senior executives, men and women, are white. The rest are 21% Asian, 3% Latino, 2% Black, 0.6% other races, 0.2% Native American, and 0.1% Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. So what we know, again, from the top 500 companies, only 16 of them have given us information on this, but white men account for 72% of corporate leadership. Do we genuinely believe that white men are basically the most qualified for these positions? Or does it have a lot to do with income disparity? Does it have a lot to do with social class, upward mobility, basically equality of opportunity? That's what this all really comes down to. And no one is saying that there's ever going to be complete egalitarian equality of opportunity. That is unfortunately not possible. But at the same, like Michael Alberts pointed out many times in my conversation with him, I'll never be Michael Jordan. No matter how much I try, no matter what I do, I'll never be Michael Jordan. It's just not in the cards. If I try, if I work hard on it, maybe I can be Michael Jordan Jr. We'll find out.
Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change. And the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976, they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. They're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for their money. But do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in his company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We certainly don't have to go all the way to socialism to find something that is fair for hardworking Americans.
I genuinely believe this. That's the ones I want to shake and be like, you see this, don't you? Like, you get it. It's all a lie. Either you don't understand that it's a lie, or you accept that it's a lie, but you're already winning, so you don't care. Because you got yours, right?
Did you enjoy what you just watched and now crave more nectar of the damned? Did you know that if you're watching on YouTube, you're only getting half the surfy experience? We upload all of our content commercial and censorship free to our Patreon. Due to the general demonetization of our videos, we now upload half of our original content directly to those who can help us produce this show. Want even more nectar than that? Well, come join us at twitch.tv/TheSerfsTV, where we do weekly live streams, debates, interviews, AMAs, and more. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can help support our show 100% free by subscribing to our Twitch channel. So come join us, be merry, and know that your support is helping us do great things.
Because that's what it costs to get him. Because if you don't pay that much, someone else will.
What a liar. What a
Lance just want to mention that based on studies, 1 in 5 CEO are psychopaths, which I think contributes some of the CEO behavior.
Holy shit, dude. Holy shit. What a fucking liar, dude. Holy shit.
What a Weasley little liar, dude.
Fucking 10 out of 10.
That's funny.
We would like to thank Miranda Marone for being our Lord and Savior. Please go subscribe to their SoundCloud and help support their art as they're helping support ours. We'd like to thank our lords, Ricky Pilgrim, I'm Raft, Michaelia Schmidt, Molly thinks she's cool. They are the pillars of our organization and helping us complete great things. And now presenting our Knights of the Round Table. Josh Mickelson, Schizosaurus, Dr. Zayas, Dylan Blythe, Paul Parfit, Andre Lynn Epperly, Daniel Kahn, Josh Mickelson, Angela, Jed Lewis, Cooper Pilot, and Todd Lajeunesse.